We'll just talk a little bit about the programmes that we follow. So we follow the Letters and Sounds. The Letters and Sounds programme, which is a resource published by the Department for Education, and it consists of 6 phases. So that's primarily the phonics programme we follow, but we do use other resources too. So we use Jolly Phonics and various resources that you can find online too. Okay, we'll go through some of the terminology. We're expected in high quality phonics lessons to be using this terminology. The phoneme is the very discrete sound in each word. So, for example, in cat it's k. So it's the discrete phonemes in a word. So, and we use the term initial phoneme. So what is the initial phoneme in the word cat? K, is the phoneme. The grapheme is how it's letter correspondence. Segmenting and blending is just as I've said, it's using sounding out strategies to make the word and blend the word. Digraph is basically 2 letters, 1 sound, so sh and are digraphs. And trigraph, obviously 3 letters like I, 3 letters, 1 sound. Split digraph are things like Magic E. So Magic E we would have called it Magic E. It's called a split digraph now. So if your children come home saying, "Oh, mummy, daddy, there's a split digraph," you'll know what they mean. So it's when you add the letter on the end and it changes the sound. That's basically the terminology that we use from early years all the way to the end of Key Stage 2 and actually throughout the school now. I start really with phase 1 in this autumn term. So phase 1 is very much, as we've suggested, those sorts of things: environmental, instrumental sounds, body percussion, rhythm and rhyme, alliteration, voice sounds. And we touch on it every day. There are things like taking children out and getting them to really tune in and listen to sounds in the environment, playing instruments, blindfolding the children, letting them have a go at recognising which sounds I was playing first, second, third, etc. Body percussion, that's lots of rhythms, all of those sorts of things, and we do it all through just our routines. That phase 1 also starts at preschool 2, and then we go on to phase 2. So we've already in reception started learning the discrete phonic sounds, so s, at, etc., and we'll be progressing through the different phonemes throughout the year. And basically that's phase 2. It's just going through those discrete phonemes.
The children might tell you what, oh no, you're schwaring, and that's the term that we use if you're adding on an extra phoneme. So, now I can't think of a word.
T, t, t. Yeah. Instead of saying t or p, where you can hear that sound at the end, you have to make it discrete. So it's t, 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 and not adding that extra sound at the end, which you wouldn't see in the graphing. You wouldn't write t and then a u as t. You'd write just the graphing.
This is what happens if they are doing that, then when they write it down, they're writing it incorrectly.
But saying sounds correctly, a lot of people say m still, and we would say mm. A lot of people say n, and we say mm. So it's making sure that we're saying the sounds correctly at home and at school.
This is really important when you're helping your child learn the sounds. Just remember not to add an at the end of the consonant sound. So say not ma, not la. Because then later it's easier to blend the sounds together to make the words. For example, if you say ma, a, ta, it's really hard for the child to say mat. But if you go a, t, so much easier to put those sounds together to say mat.
And this is what the capital letter looks like, a B, and it makes the B sound. B, B, B. Not B, but B, B, B. It's the short unit of sound. Really make it quite short. I'm going to show you some words now on screen that feature that B sound. Maybe you could have a go of reading them before I get to it. Here's the first one. B, I, G. Big. B, bag.
Okay, Mr. Thorne there was doing fantastic segmenting and blending. In Perranporth School, we use our arms, so your children may have already started coming home with their arm and they may be trying to say any potato or I'd like my dinner and using their arm, and it's because from the day they start in reception and through the reception year and into Mrs. Laty's class, we encourage them to segment and blend using their arm. So, for example, Mr. Thorne was saying bag. We would say, right, get your arms out, children, and make them start here and say and then blend it. If they come home and they're using their arm, that's brilliant, and it's encouraging that where possible and modelling that with your children as well. If they're stuck on a word at home and they find it in their book and they want to sound it out or segment and blend, you could say, have a go on your arm.
Especially in year 1 and year 2 for writing words that they don't know how to spell, we always, well, I definitely encourage them to sound it out first. Have a go first, rather than writing it down for them, because then they tend to rely on it, having it written down. When it's especially CVC words like big, cat, they need to be able to segment them and write them down. And CVC words are words that begin with a consonant, they've got a vowel, and then another consonant.
Especially when they're mid-writing in year 2, because obviously they're on that level again, where they would use their fingers as well as using their arms to find each sound as well.
Every week in Trevithick, I use one of his videos just to help cement or reinforce the phoneme that we're learning, and the children love it because he uses a puppet called Geraldine, and she goes off around the house to find things beginning with the phoneme, for example, and they come back and the children have a good go at guessing what Mr. Thorne might have found and those sorts of things. And later on this term, we've actually got a puppet that's going to go home with each of the children, and they're going to look around their house with the puppet for different things beginning with different phonemes.
So phase 3, they begin in reception class, and then we carry on with phase 3 in year 1. As you notice, the phonemes, we've got digraphs, some trigraphs in there as well. Those are the ones that the children find trickier. And we do lots of 2 letters, 1 sound, which 2 letters are making the sound. We do lots of using sound buttons, so that's in the word, drawing buttons underneath to represent the phonemes. So yeah, these are all the phase 3 phonemes that they will learn.
And here you can see the sound buttons that Rachel was talking about, that we encourage the children from Trevithick through Key Stage 1 to write the sound buttons in under the words, because it really helps, again, cement those phonemes and helps them picture the words. So that's an example of a sound button. Would you like a go, parents? Get your arms ready. Okay, let's segment and blend the word cat. Are we ready? Cat. Oh, fantastic. I didn't hear any schwarring. Brilliant, well done. Okay, again, this is a little bit of an example of where segmenting gets that little bit more tricky, because we have a digraph. Digraph. Actually, we've got 2 digraphs and then a phoneme at the end. So again, it's the sound buttons, because in my class, when we get to that sort of word, I'll say, oh, how many sound buttons have we got in the word queen? And they'll go, 5. And I'll say, oh, let's think about it. We've got a digraph, we've got doubly, another digraph, let's think about it. And then they can see how that word is made up of the sounds or the phonemes. So queen is another one. Let's have another go. Ready? Queen.
Before we move on to phase 4, again, in year 1, we're just really going over what they've already learned in reception, so making sure that they've got the segmenting arm, that they can segment and blend accurately, using that in their writing, in their reading. When they're getting stuck, we need to use a phonics first approach. So if they're in their reading book, when they meet a word they don't know, the first thing they need to do is to be sounding it out, rather than relying on the pictures in their books. They are a good clue to help them that it really needs to be phonics first. Once we've learnt all of the phase 3 phonemes, then we move on to phase 4. And in phase 4 again, we're just practicing our segmenting and blending with perhaps longer words than they've seen before in the previous phases. Phase 5 is again in year 1, and that's where we learn that a phoneme can be written down in different ways by a grapheme. So the phoneme O can be written with OE, OA, OW. It can be split O in a split digraph. So it does become trickier then. They are, as I said, learning that the phoneme can be written down in different ways, in different graphemes. The split digraphs that Nadia mentioned, we will also call those magic rainbows. So they might say, oh, there's a magic rainbow in that word. So, for example, A, as in cake, the magic rainbow, they're working together to make that A sound. At the end of phase 5 in year 1, they have the phonics screening check in June of year 1. They come out one at a time with myself, and we go into the meeting room, and they are asked to read 20 real words and 20 alien words or nonsense words. And these are the nonsense words. And they're expected to segment and blend them accurately. So this one would be fot. We did find that the aliens were confusing them a little bit and that they were trying to make them into real words. So they might have changed it to photo or other things. But now I think that the children are really used to seeing the alien and the real words around the classroom. Like, these are the ones I've got in our class, we use them regularly, and just segmenting and blending them. They're also used to coming out with me and doing some phonics with me on a one-to-one basis. So I don't want you to be worried about the phonics screening check. But yeah, as I said, I will send a practice one home for you to practice with. They just have to segment and blend the words together. They do get harder as the check moves on. So this one, or flam, that was a particularly tricky one. And then there are real words in there as well. So we do lots of practice of reading real words and alien words, or real words and silly words as we call them. This is the website which we use quite a lot to play these practice games. Segment and blend, so shaped, and decide if that's a real word or a silly word. It just exposes them and gets them used to seeing alien words every day, and just getting used to that and not being put off when they say that that word doesn't make sense. So we'll just say, oh, it's just a silly word, or it's just the alien's name.
And you'll notice in both the early years classroom and in St Piran, we have a silly word rule that the children add to. So when we make up our own silly words, we stick them on a post-it and stick them up on our silly word rule. So it becomes normal to read nonsense words.
Phonics is part of our, well, it's in all of our classes. We do it every day. After playtime, throughout Key Stage 1 and Trinidad, you will see phonics happening for 20 minutes every day. And we use it constantly. If I'm writing on the whiteboard, I'll ask the children, oh, can you help me write that word? Let's segment it together. So yeah, they're really good at using their phonics and applying it to when they're learning in all other subjects.
Okay, so in year 2 we will get on to phase 6, but on entry to year 2 we obviously assess the children on entry. So obviously with 6 weeks off there could be some gaps that arise, or there's maybe some phonemes that we need to look at, and maybe have some groups just to work on particular phonemes. So children come from Rachel's class into my class. We'll do an assessment on phase 3, 4 and 5, even though phase 3 might have been a long time ago, and obviously we're going to have children progressing at different rates, different reading abilities, different spelling abilities, so we'll put them into groups. We have 2 groups at the moment, and depending on which group they're in, they'll have different spellings each week. So the one thing we haven't mentioned yet is we will be going through it in a moment, but we have a 4-part lesson to phonics. So the first part is always the revision part. So we'll strip it back to phase 3, 4 and 5 like we mentioned earlier, and we'll go through like some of these cards here, the flashcards, and in year 2, ideally, we'll go through a select few that we know there's some areas that the children need to revise. So we carry on with phase 5 for the first term, then eventually they'll hopefully become more fluent readers, better spellers, and words will become more automatic. So for reading, so we look at the base or root words, and then we mainly focus on the suffixes, and that is the part of the word that goes at the end. So it can change the sort of tense of a word. So for instance, you could have run, and it could be running, and then we can look at how the tense changed and goes to ran. It could be a word like kind, and it could be then kindness or kindly. We also look at prefixes, and for instance, obviously we're looking at kind, the prefix for kind would be unkind, so we look at the different meanings and how it affects that. We're now assessed in year 2 for our spelling, punctuation and grammar. Basically it's something that we all have to do. So we do a lot of cross links to phonics within your literacy lessons every day basically. We also look at silent letters. We look at a lot more trickier words, longer words, and we'll be revising the syllables which has been learnt in reception and in year 1.
Okay, what does a phonics lesson look like? Matt was talking about this earlier. I'll just go through it. So we always have a revisit and review where we go through the previous phonemes. So we've done 4 or 5 phonemes since children have started in Trevithick, and every day we'll go back through the previous phonemes that we've been learning so that we recap and revisit and review. So I might be saying, it might be at the moment, but I'll still be holding up the phonics card for or which were the previous phonemes, and again making sure that they're saying the phoneme correctly, talking about whether it's a bouncy phoneme, so it's bouncy, or is a long phoneme. And so we'll always be just revisiting and reviewing and consolidating in the very first bit of a session. Then there's the teach, which is the new phoneme, and we'll be saying, oh, and today we're learning the phoneme, and it might be we watch Mr. Thorne, sing a song, do an action, play a game, something like that, but we'll be teaching them the new phoneme. The practice is the game, so it might be like Rachel said, going onto the internet and then having a game. In Trevithick it might be we pass round a feelie bag and they pull something out and they've got to segment the word or do the action for that word. So just a little game, again, to help cement the phoneme, and then we apply, and that's their sort of whiteboard work, or at this stage in Trevithick it might be forming the action in the air or going over to the sand tray, or sometimes we take chalk outside to the playground and they do lots of chalking. And as they move through early years and into Key Stage 1, obviously they'll have harder application really of the phoneme. So that's an example of the goat had a long beard. They'd be expected to maybe write that on a whiteboard or in their phonics book. I just want to say really that throughout Key Stage 1, if you do want to come and see a phonics session, they're always at 10:45, straight after play. Please do come in and see what goes on. If you are at all worried or you think, I'd just like to know more about phonics, we're more than happy to have you at the back of the room or joining in, and that would be, we'd be more than happy to have you, so do come along if you'd like.
Yes, that's what I was talking about, the Year 1 phonics screening check, which happens in June. They'll be expected to segment and blend these words. There's 20 alien words, silly words, and 20 real words that they need to be able to segment and blend. Like I said, I will send home a previous paper for the Year 1 children to practice with. It's nothing for them to be worried about. We don't tell them it's happening. They'll just come up and do some phonics with me. But as I said, they're quite used to me doing a little bit of extra learning or different learning with me. One thing I just wanted to mention was, although we're not following the Read, Write, Ink scheme, the Read, Write, Ink flashcards are really good. They've got little rhymes on. So, and again, as I was talking about, phonemes having more than one grapheme, so E could be written down like this or like this. But on the back, it's got different rhymes. So you might hear the children saying, oh, E, what can you see? Or E, cup of tea. Just so to get that really embedded, and that you start them as well in your class, getting those rhymes and embedding them. So you might have heard A, snail in the rain is another one, or oo, poo at the zoo is their favourite one, I think.
So yeah, that's basically a quick tour of phonics from early years through to the end of Key Stage 1.